Why did this dinosaur have colorful feathers and nobody knew? Imagine discovering that dinosaurs, those giants that ruled the Earth millions of years ago, were not only scaly and ferocious, but also sported vibrant, colorful feathers. Yes, you heard right. Colorful feathers. But why did this surprising discovery go unnoticed for so long? Today, we're going to embark on a fascinating journey to unravel the mysteries behind dinosaur feathers. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged and discover how science is rewriting the history of these incredible prehistoric beings. Let's get started. The journey to understand why some dinosaurs had feathers begins with a revolutionary discovery that has changed our perception of these prehistoric giants. For many years, dinosaurs were imagined as creatures covered in scales, similar to modern reptiles. However, advances in paleontology and new technologies have revealed a surprising truth. Many dinosaurs, especially theropods, which include the ancestors of birds, had feathers. This discovery was not immediate. Paleontologists around the world began to find fossils with filamentous structures that resembled primitive feathers. These finds were initially met with skepticism, as they challenged the traditional view of dinosaurs. However, over time and as evidence accumulated, the scientific community came to accept that feathers were a common feature among many dinosaurs. The preservation of these feathers in fossils is a delicate and rare process. Special conditions are required for soft tissues such as feathers to be fossilized. Exceptional paleontological sites, such as those found in China, have provided many of the best-preserved specimens. These fossils reveal an astonishing variety of feather shapes and sizes, from simple filaments to complex structures similar to the feathers of modern birds. The discovery of feathers in dinosaurs not only changed our understanding of what these animals looked like, but also raised intriguing questions about their function and evolution. These questions will be explored in the following sections, where we will discuss how feathers may have helped dinosaurs adapt to their environment, communicate, and eventually evolve into the birds we know today. By understanding the discovery of feathers, we set the stage for exploring their multiple functions and the impact this trait had on the lives of dinosaurs. Let's take a deeper dive into the evolution of these fascinating structures and discover why they were so important to the survival and success of these incredible animals. With the discovery of feathers in dinosaurs, the question arises: how did these structures evolve? The evolution of feathers is a complex process that unfolded over millions of years, starting with simple filaments and culminating in the intricate feathers we see in modern birds. The early stages of this evolution likely began with simple, hair-like filamentous structures that covered the bodies of some dinosaurs. These proto-feathers lacked the complexity of modern feathers, but they did offer significant advantages, such as thermal insulation. In a world where regulating body temperature was crucial, these structures helped dinosaurs stay warm, especially in colder environments or at night. As time went on, these simple structures evolved into more complex forms. Branched feathers began to appear, offering not only insulation but also new possibilities for display and communication. Dinosaurs with colorful feathers could use them to attract mates or intimidate rivals, creating an evolutionary advantage that further fueled the development of these structures. The transition from simple feathers to modern feathers involved several intermediate steps. Fossils show a diversity of feather shapes, from long, soft filaments to more rigid, flat structures. Each of these shapes likely served different functions, adapting to the specific needs of each dinosaur species. The evolution of feathers is also closely linked to the origin of flight. Although many feathered dinosaurs were not capable of flight, feathers may have helped some to glide or perform longer leaps. These early flight abilities would have been advantageous for escaping predators or reaching new habitats, paving the way for the evolution of birds. By exploring the evolution of feathers, we begin to understand how these structures became so diverse and functional. In the next section, we will explore the many functions that colorful feathers played in dinosaur life, from temperature regulation to social communication. This understanding will help us further appreciate the complexity and beauty of these fascinating animals. Now that we understand how feathers evolved, let's explore the many functions these colorful structures played in the lives of dinosaurs. Feathers weren't just ornaments. They played crucial roles in helping dinosaurs survive and thrive in their environments. This form of sexual selection may have been a significant driver in the evolution of colorful feathers. Camouflage. In some cases, feathers may have helped dinosaurs blend in with their environment. Patterns and colors that blended in with vegetation or soil could have offered protection from predators or aided hunting, allowing dinosaurs to sneak up on their prey. Regulation of social behavior. In addition to individual display, feathers may have played a role in regulating social behavior within dinosaur groups. Visual cues helped establish hierarchies and maintain group cohesion, reducing conflict and promoting cooperation. Preparation for flight. Although many feathered dinosaurs were not capable of flight, feathers may have helped some to glide or perform longer leaps. These nascent flight abilities would have been advantageous for escaping predators or reaching new habitats, setting the stage for the evolution of birds. By understanding these functions, we can better appreciate the complexity and importance of feathers in dinosaur life. In the next section, we will explore why this fascinating feature went unnoticed for so long and what challenges scientists faced in unraveling this mystery. The discovery of feathers in dinosaurs is relatively recent in the history of paleontology. For many years, the classic image of dinosaurs was that of scaly, reptilian creatures, without any evidence of feathers. But why did this fascinating feature go unnoticed for so long? Technological limitations. One of the main reasons is the difficulty of preserving soft tissues, such as feathers, in the fossil record. Fossilization generally favors the preservation of hard body parts, such as bones and teeth. Feathers, being delicate structures, rarely survive the fossilization process. Only in exceptional conditions, such as in volcanic ash deposits or in low-oxygen environments, can these structures be preserved. Paleontological sites. Most dinosaur fossils with well-preserved feathers have been found in specific sites, such as the Liaoning fossil beds in China. These locations offer unique conditions that have allowed for the preservation of fine details, such as feathers. Before the discovery of these sites, evidence for feathers in dinosaurs was scarce and fragmentary. Scientific biases. In addition to physical limitations, scientific biases also played a role. For a long time, dinosaurs were viewed as giant reptiles, distant from birds. The idea that dinosaurs could have feathers seemed unlikely, and the evidence was often dismissed or misinterpreted. Recent advances. It was only with advances in microscopy and chemical analysis techniques that scientists were able to begin to identify and study fossilized feathers in greater detail. These new technologies allowed a re-evaluation of existing evidence and the discovery of new fossils that confirmed the presence of feathers in many dinosaurs. By understanding these challenges, we can better appreciate the magnitude of the discovery of dinosaur feathers and the impact this revelation has had on our understanding of these animals. In the next section, we will explore the modern technologies that made these discoveries possible and how they continue to expand our knowledge of the prehistoric world. The discovery of dinosaur feathers was made possible by significant advances in technology and scientific methodologies. These innovations have allowed paleontologists to examine fossils in unprecedented detail, revealing features that had previously gone unnoticed. Electron microscopy, one of the most advanced technologies. Why did this dinosaur have colorful feathers and nobody knew? Imagine discovering that dinosaurs, those giants that ruled the Earth millions of years ago, were not only scaly and ferocious, but also sported vibrant, colorful feathers. Yes, you heard right. Colorful feathers. But why did this amazing discovery go unnoticed for so long? Today, we're going to embark on a fascinating journey to unravel the mysteries behind dinosaur feathers. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged and discover how science is rewriting the history of these incredible prehistoric beings. Let's get started. The journey to understand why some dinosaurs had feathers begins with a groundbreaking discovery that has changed our perception of these prehistoric giants. For many years, dinosaurs were imagined as creatures covered in scales, similar to modern reptiles. However, advances in paleontology and new technologies have revealed a surprising truth. Many dinosaurs, especially tetrapods, which include the ancestors of birds, had feathers. This discovery was not immediate. Paleontologists around the world began to find fossils with filamentous structures that resembled primitive feathers. These discoveries were initially met with skepticism, as they challenged the traditional view of dinosaurs. However, over time and as evidence accumulated, the scientific community came to accept that feathers were a common feature among many dinosaurs. The preservation of these feathers in fossils is a delicate and rare process. Special conditions are required for soft tissues such as feathers to be fossilized. Exceptional paleontological sites, such as those found in China, have provided many of the best preserved specimens. These fossils reveal an astonishing variety of feather shapes and sizes, from simple filaments to complex structures similar to the feathers of modern birds. The discovery of feathers in dinosaurs not only changed our understanding of what these animals looked like, but also raised intriguing questions about their function and evolution. These questions will be explored in the following sections, where we will discuss how feathers may have helped dinosaurs adapt to their environment, communicate, and eventually evolve into the birds we know today. By understanding the discovery of feathers, we set the stage for exploring their multiple functions and the impact this trait had on the lives of dinosaurs. We will delve deeper into the evolution of these fascinating structures and discover why they were so important to the survival and success of these incredible animals. With the discovery of feathers in dinosaurs, the question arises: how did these structures evolve? The evolution of feathers is a complex process that unfolded over millions of years, starting with simple filaments and culminating in the intricate feathers we see in modern birds. The early stages of this evolution likely began with simple, hair-like filamentous structures that covered the bodies of some dinosaurs. These protofeathers lacked the complexity of modern feathers, but they offered significant advantages, such as thermal insulation. In a world where regulating body temperature was crucial, these structures helped dinosaurs stay warm, especially in colder environments or at night. Over time, these simple structures evolved into more complex forms. Branched feathers began to appear, offering not only insulation but also new possibilities for display and communication. Dinosaurs with colorful feathers could use them to attract mates or intimidate rivals, creating an evolutionary advantage that fueled the further development of these structures. The transition from simple feathers to modern feathers involved several intermediate steps. Fossils show a diversity of feather shapes, from long, soft filaments to more rigid, flat structures. Each of these shapes likely served different functions, adapting to the specific needs of each dinosaur species. The evolution of feathers is also closely linked to the origin of flight. Although many feathered dinosaurs were not capable of flight, feathers may have helped some to glide or perform longer leaps. These early flight abilities would have been advantageous for escaping predators or reaching new habitats, paving the way for the evolution of birds. By exploring the evolution of feathers, we begin to understand how these structures became so diverse and functional. In the next section, we will explore the many functions that colorful feathers played in dinosaur life, from temperature regulation to social communication. This understanding will help us to better appreciate the elaborate displays of feathers, with specific movements and postures, would have highlighted the most vibrant and healthy feathers, signaling an individual's reproductive fitness. Visual communication. Feathers also served as important visual communication tools. Distinctive patterns and colors could convey information about a dinosaur's social status, health, or intentions. For example, a dominant male might display more vivid feathers to assert his position within a group. Social interactions. In species that lived in groups, feathers could help maintain social cohesion. Clear visual signals reduced the need for physical confrontation, promoting more peaceful coexistence. Feathers could also be used to coordinate group activities, such as hunting or defense against predators. Camouflage and protection. In some cases, feathers could provide camouflage, helping dinosaurs hide from predators or sneak up on prey. Patterns that blended into the environment would have been especially useful for species that relied on ambushes to hunt. Parental care. Feathers may also have played a role in parental care. Dinosaurs with feathers may have used them to keep eggs warm during incubation, increasing the chances of reproductive success. Additionally, colorful feathers may have helped offspring recognize and follow their parents. By exploring how feathers influenced dinosaur behavior, we gain a richer and more detailed understanding of their lives and interactions. In the next section, we will explore the relationship between feathers and the origin of flight, and how these structures paved the way for the evolution of birds. The evolution of feathers in dinosaurs is closely linked to the origin of flight. Although many feathered dinosaurs were not capable of flight, these structures played a crucial role in preparing for this extraordinary ability. We will explore how feathers contributed to the development of flight and how this ability manifested itself in different species. Gliding and leaping. Before active flight, many feathered dinosaurs likely used their structures to glide or perform longer leaps. Feathers helped increase lift and stability during these movements, allowing dinosaurs to cover greater distances with less effort. This ability would have been advantageous for escaping predators or reaching new habitats. Evolution of wings. Over time, the feathers on the forelimbs of dinosaurs began to specialize, forming rudimentary wings. These structures allowed greater control over gliding and, eventually, the ability to perform short flights. Natural selection favored individuals with feathers that were more efficient for flight, leading to the development of more complex and aerodynamic wings. Flying dinosaurs. Some species of dinosaurs, such as Microraptor, evolved the ability to perform limited flights. Microraptor, with its 4 feathered wings, probably used these structures to glide between trees, taking advantage of air resistance to control its descent. Transition to birds. The evolution of feathers and flight culminated in the transition from dinosaurs to modern birds. Birds inherited and improved upon these structures, developing highly specialized feathers that enabled a wide range of flight styles. The ability to fly opened up new ecological opportunities, allowing birds to occupy niches that were inaccessible to terrestrial dinosaurs. Behavioral adaptations. In addition to physical adaptations, flight also required behavioral changes. Dinosaurs that evolved the ability to fly had to adjust their strategies for foraging, reproduction, and defense against predators. These behavioral adaptations were essential to the evolutionary success of birds. By exploring the relationship between feathers and flight, we gain a deeper understanding of how these structures shaped dinosaur evolution and set the stage for the emergence of birds. In the next section, we will discuss the challenges paleontologists face when studying fossil feathers and the importance of preserving paleontological sites. The study of fossil feathers presents several challenges that paleontologists must overcome to gain an accurate understanding of dinosaur appearance and behavior. Here are some of the main obstacles. Delicate preservation. Feathers are delicate structures that are rarely preserved in the fossil record. Special conditions are required for these fragile structures to become fossilized, such as low oxygen environments or rapid coverage by sediments. Most dinosaur fossils do not have feathers due to the difficulty of preserving them. 1. Interpretation of structures. Even when feathers are preserved, interpreting their structure and function can be tricky. Paleontologists must distinguish between different types of feathers and other filamentous structures that may be present in fossils. Detailed analysis with electron microscopes and other advanced techniques is essential for this task. 1. Color determination. Identifying the original colors of feathers is a significant challenge. Although modern methods, such as the analysis of fossilized pigments, have allowed the reconstruction of color patterns in some fossils, this task is complex and not always possible. The presence of pigments such as melanin can provide clues, but degradation over time complicates the analysis. 1. Paleo-environmental context. Understanding the environment in which feathered dinosaurs lived is crucial to interpreting the function of these structures. Factors such as climate, vegetation, and interactions with other species influence the evolution and utility of feathers. Reconstructing these ancient environments requires a combination of geological and biological evidence. 2. Fossil availability. The scarcity of well-preserved fossils with feathers limits the amount of data available for study. Many of the most informative fossils have been found in specific locations, such as Liaoning Province in China, but these sites are rare. Discovering new sites with ideal preservation conditions is essential to advancing this field. 1. Technologies and methods. The development and application of new technologies are key to overcoming these challenges. Techniques such as computed tomography and advanced chemical analysis allow scientists to examine fossils in unprecedented detail, revealing features that had previously gone unnoticed. 1. In addressing these challenges, paleontologists continue to expand our knowledge of feathered dinosaurs, revealing fascinating details about the lives of these animals and their connections to modern birds. In the next section, we will explore how these discoveries are redefining our understanding of dinosaur evolution and their impact on paleontology. Discoveries about feathered dinosaurs have had a profound impact on paleontology, transforming our understanding of how these animals looked, behaved, and evolved. Here are some of the key implications of these findings. Revising the image of dinosaurs. The classic image of dinosaurs as scaly, reptilian creatures has been drastically altered. We now know that many dinosaurs, especially theropods, sported a variety of feathers that served a variety of functions, from thermal insulation to sexual display. Connection to modern birds. The presence of feathers in dinosaurs reinforces the evolutionary connection between these animals and modern birds. Birds are now widely recognized as direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, and feathers are a key feature linking these two groups. Evolution of feathers. Studying fossil feathers has allowed scientists to trace the evolution of these structures over time. From simple filaments to complex feathers, the evolution of feathers reflects adaptations to different environments and ecological needs. Behavior and ecology. Feathers provide important clues about dinosaur behavior and ecology. They may have been used for visual communication, sexual display, camouflage, and even to aid in the incubation of eggs. These functions suggest a behavioral complexity that was not previously widely recognized. Species diversity. The discovery of feathers in several dinosaur species reveals a surprising diversity among these animals. Each species may have adapted feathers in unique ways, reflecting different survival and adaptation strategies. New questions and research. These discoveries have opened new lines of inquiry in paleontology. Questions about the biology of feathers, their function in different environments, and their role in dinosaur evolution continue to motivate scientific research. Advanced technologies and methods. The study of fossil feathers has spurred the development and application of new technologies, such as electron microscopy and chemical analysis of pigments. These techniques not only help reveal details about feathers, but also contribute to a broader understanding of fossilization and soft tissue preservation. By redefining our understanding of dinosaurs, these discoveries also remind us of the dynamic and interconnected nature of life on Earth. In the next section, we will explore how feathered dinosaurs are connected to modern birds, and how this connection shapes our view of birds as living dinosaurs. The connection between feathered dinosaurs and modern birds is one of the most fascinating discoveries in paleontology. Birds are now recognized as the only surviving dinosaurs, and this evolutionary relationship is supported by a number of scientific evidence. Common origin. Birds evolved from a group of theropod dinosaurs, specifically the Maniraptorans. This lineage includes species such as Velociraptor and Trudon, which had bird-like features, including feathers. Anatomical structures. Birds share several anatomical features with theropod dinosaurs, such as hollow bones, flexible backbones, and modified forelimbs, wings in birds. These structural similarities suggest a common origin. Plumes and feathers. The presence of plumes in dinosaurs and feathers in birds is one of the most obvious connections. Feathers initially served for thermal insulation and display, but eventually adapted for flight in birds. Behavior and nesting. Some dinosaur species exhibited behaviors similar to those of modern birds, such as nest building and egg incubation. These behaviors suggest advanced parental care, which is common among birds. Genetics and molecular biology. Genetic studies have revealed significant similarities between the DNA of birds and dinosaurs, further supporting the evolutionary connection. Analysis of proteins and other biomarkers in dinosaur fossils has provided additional evidence of this relationship. Evolution of flight. The evolution of flight in birds is one of the most remarkable developments in the history of life on Earth. Although many feathered dinosaurs were flightless, the structures that eventually enabled flight began to develop in these animals. Diversity and adaptation. Like dinosaurs, modern birds exhibit an incredible diversity of shapes, sizes, and behaviors. This diversity is a testament to the ability of these animals to adapt to a wide variety of environments. By recognizing birds as living dinosaurs, we gain new insight into the evolution and resilience of these animals. In the next section, we will explore how these discoveries continue to inspire new questions and directions in scientific research. Discoveries about feathered dinosaurs have opened new lines of inquiry in paleontology. As our understanding of these animals deepens, new questions emerge that guide scientific research. Evolution of feathers. While we know that feathers evolved from simple filaments to complex structures, many details about this process remain unknown. What environmental and ecological factors drove this evolution? Function of feathers. Feathers served multiple functions, but there is still much to learn about how different species used these structures. For example, how did feathers influence thermoregulation or communication between individuals? Social behavior. The presence of colorful feathers suggests complex social behaviors, such as mating displays and social hierarchies. How did these behaviors manifest themselves in the daily interactions of dinosaurs? Ecological diversity. The diversity of feather forms and functions reflects a variety of ecological niches occupied by dinosaurs. How did these adaptations influence the distribution and survival of these species? Emerging technologies. Advances in analytical technologies such as electron microscopy and computed tomography continue to reveal new details about fossils. What new techniques can be developed to further improve our understanding? Conservation and preservation. The discovery of new fossil sites with ideal preservation conditions is crucial for future research. How can we best protect and study these sites to ensure they continue to provide valuable information? Environmental impact. Past climate and environmental changes influenced the evolution of dinosaurs. How did these factors shape the diversity and distribution of feathered species? These questions and research directions promise to further expand our knowledge of dinosaurs and their connection to modern birds. In the next and final section, we will summarize the points discussed and reflect on the future of research in this fascinating area. The journey of discovery about feathered dinosaurs has taken us from a basic understanding of their existence to a deep appreciation of their complexity and evolutionary importance. Let's review the main points discussed and reflect on the future of research in this area. Review of key points. Discovery of feathers. The discovery of feathers in dinosaurs revolutionized our view of these animals, revealing a diversity of forms and functions that challenged the classic image of scaly dinosaurs. Evolution and function. Feathers evolved from simple filaments into complex structures, playing crucial roles in thermoregulation, communication, and eventually flight. Behavior and ecology. Feathers influenced dinosaur behavior from mating rituals to social interactions, and reflected adaptations to diverse ecological niches. Technologies and challenges. Technological advances have allowed scientists to study fossil feathers in unprecedented detail, overcoming challenges of preservation and interpretation. Impact on paleontology. These discoveries have redefined our understanding of dinosaurs and their connection to modern birds, opening up new lines of investigation. Thoughts for the future. As we continue to explore the world of feathered dinosaurs, new discoveries and technologies promise to further expand our knowledge. Future research may include new fossil sites. The discovery of new sites with ideal preservation conditions may reveal more details about the lives of feathered dinosaurs. Advanced technologies. The development of new analytical techniques may provide even more detailed insights into the structure and function of feathers. Modeling and simulation. Computer models can help reconstruct the behavior and environment of dinosaurs, providing a more complete picture of their lives. Education and outreach. Sharing these discoveries with the public can inspire a new generation of scientists and enthusiasts, fostering an appreciation for the complexity and beauty of the natural world. As we look to the future, feathered dinosaur research continues to be a vibrant and exciting field, full of possibilities and discoveries yet to come. As we move forward, each new discovery brings us closer to a more complete understanding of the history of life on Earth.